Back to old school sports and our out of the park baseball 25 series. Can we save the Oakland A's? And we are at the start of the free agency period in the 2032 season. We've done a lot over the first 3 or so weeks of this offseason, made several trades that we think have replenished the back end of our pitching rotation and our bullpen, and have also ultimately given us some left-handed bats to replace the high-quality left-handed bats that we expected to lose this offseason. We did also make one big deal to bring back Colt Keith, who has been our key left-handed hitter over the 4 years since we traded for him from the Detroit Tigers organization. Could be a contract that comes back to haunt us a bit, but with his offensive production and being a key part of a lineup that has often struggled to score runs, we felt it was pivotal to bring back our best offensive player over the course of the 9 years now that we have been managing in Oakland. The big goal for this offseason with those other moves that we made is to find a player who can play shortstop for us. And we're in a situation where we've probably got $15 to $20 million to spend when all is said and done, depending on where we ultimately want to go in terms of our scouting, player development, and draft budget. So we can't play at the top end of the free agent market. But other than that, we can probably get just about any free agent shortstop we want. As we've talked about a lot over the past few episodes, and as many of you have shared with us in the comments, there are a ton of different options for us to look for in free agency and or the trade market and or our own organization to potentially be a starting shortstop for us next year or in some type of platoon situation at the number 6 spot in the lineup. So I think as we sit here on November 29th, as I noted at the start of free agency, we are going to take a very patient approach. I don't feel like there is one shortstop out there that is a must-have for us. Someone like Cole Young offensively would probably be the most interesting. But we could have a potential reunion with Brian Rincon. We could end up going after Maui Ahuna. We've got a lot of other options on the market here. As you can see, there are also still guys that we could definitely trade for. And we do have some prospects in our organization as well. So at this point, I think I'm just going to be patient and see who's still on the market in a couple of months. It's possible that the asking price for an Ahuna or a Rincon or even an Abrams will come down. A lot of feedback from our worldwide scouting department on this situation, and I can't say that it seemed like anyone was really pounding the table. I think a patient approach largely is going to be viewed positively by most viewers, just kind of highlighting some of the thoughts from our worldwide scouting department. Both James Miller Media and Paul West indicated that they'd probably try to wait on Rincon. Patrick DeBonis also said he'd probably move on from Rincon unless he got cheap, so that's ultimately pretty similar to just waiting on Rincon. Blade staff suggested just waiting more in general and seeing how the market evolves, both in terms of free agents and the trade market, as well as how some of the younger prospects in our system ultimately develop, which I think is largely where we've landed. Why Me 943 a little more interested in Maui Ahuna, so we're keeping an eye on him. Both Kevin McDowell and Jeansy suggested pivoting to Mr. Estrada, who you may remember we picked up last year in the international free agency, and then we signed him to a minor league contract with a major league option. Kind of forgot about it. Cleveland had grabbed him off of our team, but he was still in the minors with Cleveland. So stupidly, we had to trade to get him back from Cleveland. But he is in our organization, and hitting wise is probably one of the more interesting options out there for us with his speed and what looks like a competent bat. Doesn't have the same infield range as some other options, which is not optimal for a shortstop, but think he can still play a solid shortstop for us if that's the direction that we go. And we certainly, when this first longer round of player development is done, could get him in a quick program to hopefully work on his defense a little bit as well. So Estrada, as well as a couple of other guys, were in the mix. And as I noted, Kevin McDowell and Jeansy both think he might be the way to go. One final option is a trade option that's right now a little expensive for what I'd like to pay, but still something we'll continue to investigate over the course of the next weeks and months. And that is the option that the notorious KEV would go with, and that's trying to trade with the Mariners organization for Julio Del Campo. Looks like a pretty good defensive shortstop. Not quite Rincon range, but pretty close. And a bat that looks like it could be useful as well. He's normal in terms of his injury proneness, which is a benefit compared to Rincon and Ahuna, who are both fragile and a bit older than Del Campo. He's got decent speed. We only have high scouting accuracy on him, so we definitely should request an updated scouting report to just ensure that we know as much as possible about him. He hasn't been great in the limited major league action he's had at this point with just a 57 WRC plus. I do think looking at his batting ratings and his speed that he should be a bit better offensively than that. I think my reticence right now is just that the trade price for him is relatively high. We've got nobody that makes the deal work straight up, even if we add in Arturo Uresti, one of the top prospects in our system, that doesn't quite get it done. We've got to add in another player as well. The Notorious brought up maybe packaging some lower tier prospects together to get there, and quite honestly, it still seems to take 3 kind of 2.5 to 3-star prospects to get there, and then we still have to throw in a pretty useful major league player as well. So given that there are still at this point a lot of options available for us between our organization, other guys on the trade market, and of course free agency, I don't think pursuing Del Campo right now is something we're going to do, but depending on how things break over the next couple of months, could be something that we revisit, if I could talk properly, down the line. So I think we're going to be patient to start. We've got the winter meetings coming up in about 2.5 weeks, and then the Rule 5 draft after that. We're also going to be approaching international free agency. You probably saw back when we were on the free agent screen that we've made offers to a few veterans as far as minor league contracts to bolster our AA and AAA teams. Odds are we'll probably be losing some 4A kind of guys in the Rule 5 draft that we like to have in our organization but don't care enough to put on the 40-man roster to keep in our organization. So some of these guys that we're looking at right now may bolster us there, although conceivably some of them could be picked in the Rule 5 as well. But we'll deal with the fallout from the Rule 5 later. We've typically been able to put together pretty good minor league teams over the past few years, and hopefully can keep that going forward by the time we get to the end of spring training and the beginning of not just the major league season, but the minor league seasons as well. And before we get started moving forward in the episode, I will check in on how the first several weeks in the player development lab have gone. Unfortunately, even though we thought we were doing some relatively easy programs overall, not great so far. Kevin Stubblefield is on track trying to improve his plate discipline, but you can see everybody else is frustrated or struggling. And given that, as we noted, several of these programs were considered to be medium or easy difficulty, the fact that with 2 to 3 months ago we've only got one player on track is certainly not optimal, but there's plenty of time for that to improve and change. And we've simmed ahead about a week and a half or so. We've gotten our scouting report back on Julio Del Campo, so very high scouting accuracy now, and he really kind of looks pretty much exactly as we thought he did. I do think that his bat could be more productive than the 57 WRC plus he's put up over the first 1+ years of his career. But given the other options we have available and what it seems like it would take in a trade to pick up Del Campo right now, I think we are still just going to move forward with this patient strategy. Expect at some point in the coming weeks, as we get closer to the winter meetings, we'll start losing some of our bigger free agents. Juan Soto highlighting that list, where we'll definitely be taking some hits to fan interest. We've made a bit of progress this past offseason, moving it up to 61 from 54, but probably going to be tracking back down towards the mid-50s as we start losing some of the better free agents in our organization that we either didn't want to bring back or can't afford to bring back. And as anticipated, Juan Soto has left. The overall fan interest almost crashed. He was always going to only be a rental for us, and he did an incredibly good job as a rental for us with a 155 WRC plus over 251 at-bats. As seems to be the case with everyone in this game, he signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers 4 years, almost $130 million. So not the type of neighborhood that we could be playing in. So we wish Soto the best. Taking a look, and we did experience a 3-point hit to fan interest. So as expected, we are starting to head back down towards that mid-50s level. Was hoping we'd be able to make a little bit of progress this offseason, given that we probably just have one significant trade or signing left to fill that shortstop role. Not sure how much progress we're ultimately going to make, unfortunately. And just in case you were wondering, neither Brian Rincon nor Maui Ahuna is particularly popular, the two guys that we're most likely to pursue as a free agent shortstop. So I don't think either of them is going to have any significant impact on our fan interest, unfortunately. Ahuna at this point is looking for 5 years at $8 million a season with a player option for the final year and a no-trade clause. He's 30 years old and fragile. Rincon, 28, soon to be 29 years old and fragile, is looking for almost $11 million a year over 8 years. So at this point, neither of those contracts are all that interesting to me. I could certainly make a lower offer to either of them, but I'm not even going to rush with that right now because I'm quite honestly somewhat agnostic to if we have Rincon or Ahuna on the team next year. I don't have a real strong preference between the two of them. So I think I'm willing to just wait them out. Hopefully, maybe a month and a half from now, they'll both still be options. But if only one of them is on the market with a lower price, that's fine. And as we've talked about with Estrada in our system, guys like Del Campo that we could trade for, there's plenty of fish in the sea for shortstop at this point. If there was a Ozzie Smith or a Derek Jeter or a Cal Ripken type available, I'd certainly be trying to be more aggressive to bring them on board, but I don't think that type of player is out there this year. And after a long and successful run in Oakland, Brian Rincon is no longer our starting shortstop. Just signed an 8-year, $81.6 million deal with the Angels. Love the glove. He's had some good seasons for us, but as we talked about, he's almost 29 years old. He's fragile. They have made a long-term commitment to him. And although his 93 career WRC plus, given his glove, is really attractive, being realistic, his WRC plus has moved from 112 to 100 to 82 to 70 over the last 4 years as he's moved from his mid-20s to his late 20s. I think he's certainly better looking at his ratings than a 70 WRC plus player, but given his fragility and given the luck we had with him with 140 plus games started each of his 6 years in Oakland, despite the fact that he was fragile from the start, feel like we've gotten pretty good value out of Rincon. Wish him the best of luck. He's good in the locker room. Obviously a very talented fielder. Had another year with a well above average zone rating and defensive efficiency for us at short last year. Never won a gold glove. He was a member of our World Series championship team in 2029, though. So a nice career in Oakland for us. Feel like we got good value out of him, and we'll see if the Angels can keep him healthy and productive over the next 8 years. And the other really big loss that we were anticipating has happened. Tai Madden has moved on to the Seattle Mariners organization. So another guy going to a team within our division. He was a rental for us, similar to Soto, 7-5 with a 3.76 ERA. Struck out 106 batters in 95 2/3 innings and put up a 2 WAR for us. So he did a real nice job for us as a rental. Ended up signing 4 years, over $86 million with the Mariners. He'll be 33 before the start of the season. They do have a team option for that final season, so kudos to the Mariners for getting that. But with the money we have to spend and the 4 other starters that we'll be bringing back, as far in addition to the trades that we made earlier this offseason, as good a pitcher as Madden is, felt like the money in the low 20 to mid 20 millions a season that he was looking for wasn't the best way for us to spend the money that we do have available. And another 1-point hit to fan interest driven by the departure of Madden on top of the earlier departure of Mr. Soto. And we've got a potential offer to Maui Ahuna. You'll remember he was looking for 8 years, or 5 years at $8 million a season, so $40 million total with a player option for the final season. We were just trying to get a conversation going with him. We're only offering him $21 million over 3 years, so an average of $7 million a year. And only this upcoming season at $6 million would be guaranteed. We'd have team options for the final 2 years of the contract. So it's potentially just a 1-year deal. I do like Ahuna's defense as a potential bridge. Don't love his fragility, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, but over the course of his major league career, he's been a bit less productive of an offensive player than Rincon. He's also been a bit more consistent in terms of his lack of production. But with the fact that it's really just essentially a 1-year deal, I think potentially mixing Ahuna in with some of the younger guys in our organization for next year, while also potentially not making a trade is probably a reasonable path for us to consider. So we're going to go ahead and submit this offer to Mr. Ahuna. Not going to really move the dial, as we talked about, as far as fan interest if we bring him on board. But I think realistically, he's a glove that's pretty similar to Rincon, a bat that over the last couple of seasons is similar to Rincon. Not that this is a positive thing either, but the fragility of Maui Ahuna is similar to Rincon. But it's less money per season and a much shorter commitment in terms of the years. I think even with the fact that it's effectively just a one-year deal with a couple of team options for the second and third years, we probably could trade the contract away in the spring if we needed to without getting hurt too much by it. So I didn't necessarily think we'd be potentially bringing on a shortstop this early in the offseason, but with Rincon gone and with the price for the likes of Del Campo still higher than I'm willing to pay on the trade market, the fact that it's really just a one-year deal to Ahuna makes me pretty comfortable getting this one out there. And we've made it to the start of the Rule 5 draft. Maui Ahuna reportedly favors that offer that we've made to him, so still waiting to hear back officially on whether he will be a member of this Oakland A's organization for the 2032 season and possibly a bit beyond that. But we're going to turn our attention to the Rule 5 draft now. Hasn't been as fruitful over the last few years as it was earlier in this playthrough, probably largely driven by the fact that our team is better now than it was in the early days of this playthrough. Hopefully we can maybe find an arm to help in the bullpen. Maybe we'll be able to find a young hitter with some potential, but not going in with high expectations, so anything we come out of will be a victory as far as I'm concerned. And for the first time in this playthrough, we ended up not picking anyone in the Rule 5 draft. We had 5 guys plucked out of our organization, 3 of whom were veteran kind of 4A guys, and then 2 were guys in their mid-20s that we needed to put on the 40-man roster, and we decided not to. Very marginal pitching prospects, both of them. We already have 37 players on our 40-man roster. We're hoping to push it up to 38 with the addition of Ahuna, and it's very conceivable that we may be making another trade or another free agent signing or 2 over the next few months. So given that the players who happen to be available in the Rule 5 this year seem to have an extremely low chance of making our roster, and we've got a pretty nice pool of young pitchers in their early to mid-20s that are now on our 40-man roster that are going to be competing for spots in the major league, particularly in the bullpen this year, perhaps the last 2 or 3 spots in the bullpen. Just wanted to go with a more organic youth movement of players that we like than potentially bringing on a veteran who was making more money and at least on paper doesn't look any better than some of the prospects we have in our system. So nobody picked in the Rule 5 this year for Oakland. And as we head towards the end of the month of December and into the beginning of January, Brian Ramos, another one of our rentals, is officially gone. You may remember he was pretty productive for us in 50 at-bats, but unfortunately he suffered a season-ending injury. Looks like he signed with the Astros organization 2 years at a little over $10 million a year. pretty respectable right-handed hitter at this point, but on the wrong side of 30. Doesn't bring a ton to the table defensively at this point. Want to go a little higher quality for our defensive players, but he is a guy who we certainly could have afforded. The fans not happy with that. And when we take a look at fan interest, lost another point back down to 56. So my wizard-like ability to accurately predict what would be happening with fan interest in this game still appears to be intact. Still waiting to hear officially on Mr. Ahuna. I would expect that over the next week or two we might get some resolution there before we turn our full attention towards the international amateur free agent class. And we've just taken another 1 point hit to fan interest to get all the way back down to 55. Mason Black, who's pitched with us frequently over the past several years, veteran, making just $1.1 million, but again, given the young pitchers we have on the way, figured bringing back a 33-year-old pretty generic right-handed arm in the bullpen at this point didn't make a ton of sense. He had some great success for us briefly as a pretty solid stopper a few years ago when we first brought him on board. He's dealt with some injury issues and been in and out of the rotation and on and off of the major league team at times over the past few years. Ends his Oakland career with a 4.22 ERA over 328 plus innings and 4 seasons with us. And we have finally gotten Maui Ahuna signed, so he will certainly be in the mix to be our shortstop next year. I think it's a pretty good contract for us, given our financial constraints and his age and fragility. Basically, it's a 1-year, $6.7 million guaranteed deal in a worst-case scenario, and we potentially got the team options for the next couple of years if we don't see better opportunities in the trade market or better opportunities that develop within our organization, but feel we've now got a competent, proven major league shortstop who should be an asset defensively. And depending on what happens with some of the younger guys, maybe he ends up a Gold Glove caliber second baseman for us this year at points. Gives us a little more optionality without making a long-term commitment. And given our situation in Oakland, I think that's a reasonable approach. And we've simmed ahead a few more days to the start of the international amateur free agent signing period. I know we had given our loyal viewers and our worldwide scouting department a very initial preview of some of these players a couple of episodes ago, but we know a lot more about them now. So before we finish up this episode, we are going to take a look at some of the most interesting IAFA guys that we are considering. I do think this is a year where, as we've talked about in the past, given what our organization looks like and what we've done in recent drafts and IAFA periods, as well as how the overall pool looks, might be a little more focused on position players than pitchers. But as always, we'll try to remain flexible throughout the IAFA period. 2 pitchers who we've pretty consistently brought into camp, Alvaro Celis. Looks like he could be a useful major league pitcher, not necessarily the most impressive arsenal in the world, but does have potential to have 4 pitches. Not great at holding on runners, 16 years old, throwing in the mid to low 90s. Decent prospect, but again, given how our organization looks, probably not the direction that we'll go. The other starting pitcher we've been tracking is Jorge Murillo. Only a potential 3-pitch arsenal, and none of them look like they'll be exceptional. Going to be very reliant on that changeup developing, and even then his fastball with his velocity in the high 80s and low 90s is pretty pedestrian for a potential major leaguer at best. Looking for a bit less money than Solis, and they're both very easy to sign, but I think we are going to spend more of our attention and ultimately more of our money this year on the 8 prospects that we've most recently brought into camp. And not surprisingly, among those position players, they're 8 of the top 9 prospects according to our scout. Did think about bringing Juan Solorzano in because he's looking for less money than everybody else. Potentially interesting-ish bat, but he's 16 years old, almost 17. He's already fragile, and his glove looks like nothing special. So I tend to think he could still be a fallback guy for us, but I think our hope is to make a more impactful and likely expensive signing than Solorzano with most of our $5.7 million that we still have to spend this year. Taking a look at the prospects, catcher Jorge Montalvo, competent defensively, some good personality traits, not a lot of speed. Looks like he could have a interesting bat for a catcher if he completely develops. Already over 17 years old, so a bit older than some of the other prospects available. Second baseman Mauricio Ibarra, looks like he could have a glove that's above, or a bat that's above average in everything. Looks like he's a bit above average in terms of his speed. The glove, though, clearly below average. I don't think Chiquita on is quite what we want for a potential first baseman, which realistically, with his 6'4" height in those defensive ratings, is probably where he's most well suited. So I don't know that he's the answer. Third baseman Andres Bonilla, Dapandaber. Interesting prospect, potentially exceptional home run power, like the durability. Kind of has a classic third baseman's profile with limited range but a really good arm. I hope he's not the guy that we end up having to chase after. I think there's better prospects than him. I don't love the potentially below average contact, mediocre speed. Does have mediocre bunting in speed in general, at least in terms of his proficiency on the base paths. He's actually got decent speed, which would play well with that gap power. Switch hitting third baseman, to me, Dapandaber is a bit more interesting than Ibarra, but kind of have him in the same zone as Montalvo, where I'd hope that there's someone more interesting when all is said and done, and given that we are now moving into the 5 players that our scout thinks have a bit more potential, I do think we'll see some more interesting prospects there. Center fielder Vicente Laguna, a pretty well-balanced bat, should be above average in everything if he fully develops. A little older, age 17, but he is at least a 30 in his current skills and all of those ratings, so a little further along than some of the other guys. Decent speed, decent outfield range, but certainly not a superstar prospect in my view. Second baseman Guadalupe Cabeza, a.k.a. Fuzzy, another guy with some pretty severe defensive limitations, although we like his personality. I think that there's some decent pop in the bat, and he's got a bit better contact, potentially, than the third base prospect that we talked about. Also has good durability. So Cabeza, not in love with, but he's in the mix. I think the 3 guys who were most interesting to some viewers a few episodes ago are the 3 guys with 5-star potential who we'll be talking about next. I know some of you really liked Jorge Orellana Nacogdoches. Solid outfield range, solid speed, high work ethic, and one of the better bats in this class if he fully develops. 65 contact, 70 gap power, 85 home run power, and an above average eye, although he's got a lot of work to do on that front in particular. But Nacogdoches is more interesting to me than the other prospects, looking for $3 million. So he's going to be one of the more expensive options out there. But I do like Orellana. Shortstop Fabrizio Moraghetti, pretty respectable defensively, also has a high work ethic and a interesting bat for a middle infielder. Potentially great home run power, decent gap power to go with decent speed, and contact and eye that we think could both be acceptable. Got a lot of work to do with the contact and the ability to draw walks, so certainly needs to improve a lot. But Jabao Monaghetti, similar to Orellana, is interesting to me. Last but not least, the center fielder Sergio Galindo, more of a corner outfielder with his defensive ratings. Similarly, has a high work ethic, not a ton of speed. Another guy, though, with an interesting bat, potentially excellent power, and he does have that durability, which I like. The left-handed hitting, Holy Galindo, also interesting to me. So the 3 5-star guys to me are the most interesting. Realistically, we're probably only going to get one of them, as much as I'd love to try to thread a needle and get 2 of them. But even with Galindo and Monaghetti looking for $5.4 million to start, with the $5.7 million we have, I don't think it's particularly realistic to go for 2 of these 3 guys. Maybe we get one of the 3 and then pivot to a Solorzano or a less expensive pitcher or some other guys who are looking for less money that we haven't even talked about in detail here. So there's options out there. Galindo, really like the bat, really like the durability. The glove is kind of meh, and the speed is below average. Comparing him to Orellana, really like the balance of Orellana's bat. A little better defensively, a little better speed-wise. Also has the high work ethic. He's a righty hitter rather than a lefty hitter. But kind of comparing those 2 head-to-head in terms of their potential. Currently, they're pretty similar. Orellana, a little better contact right now, a little better home run power, and a little better avoiding strikeouts. But Galindo's eye is 10 points better than Orellana's right now. Looking at where we think they could end up, Orellana with more contact power, significantly more gap power, and a little better speed to make advantage of that. A bit better home run power, a bit better at avoiding strikeouts, and potentially a weaker eye. Although we are certainly worried with this 20 rating right now about Orellana completely developing and being a guy who could draw walks. If the question was Galindo or Orellana, I think I'd go with Orellana over Galindo. Comparing and throwing in Fabrizio Monaghetti into the mix. Like the glove, he's kind of middle of these guys in terms of his speed. And then we compare him to Orellana, and his bat is generally not as far along as Orellana's. And given that Monaghetti is 9 months older than Orellana, the fact that he's generally a little bit behind in terms of his current ratings offensively isn't ideal. Monaghetti, the contact potential not as good, the gap power potential not as good, the home run potential not as good, the eye potential not as good, and the avoid strikeouts potential not as good. But to be fair, when we look at the defensive ratings, Monaghetti looks like he could be a pretty solid defensive infielder, and certainly a good, solid defensive middle infielder or third baseman is going to be more valuable defensively than a competent corner outfielder, which is where Orellana probably ends up. I think right now, that being said, I probably still am leaning towards making Mr. Orellana my primary focus in this IAFA period. But if the Worldwide Scouting Department has different or actually the same opinion, both of those would be useful for me to hear. So we have added a shortstop into the mix. We're hopefully about to add some talent that can help us into the future into the mix. No one in the Rule 5 draft. You can see some very familiar names, including Tyler Soderstrom remaining on the trade block. Don't see that we're necessarily going to reunite with him. Before we finish up the episode, one final thing. Just check in on how the last month and a half or so has gone in the development lab. And I guess it's a little better that we've got two guys on track now, Jake Ortega and Amari Raphael. Disappointing that Stubblefield has gone from being on track to frustrated. Jason DeCaro struggling with that relatively easy secondary pitch improvement, which is not ideal. And then we've got five guys who are frustrated at this point. So I guess on balance, we're in a slightly better place with development this offseason than we were a month and a half ago. But hopefully we'll continue to make some improvements over the next 5 to 6 weeks and ultimately come out of here with more than 2 successful programs when all is said and done. And we will find out the answers to that in upcoming episodes, and certainly we'll figure out what we're going to do in international free agency the next time around. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.